we also need to make sure that our focus is completely upon God. Now, we talked about the fellowship aspect of worship, about the fact that we gather to worship. We don't worship in isolation, away from each other, under most circumstances at least, because we need that interaction. We need that fellowship and the encouragement that worshiping together brings. But at the same time, we also need to realize always that our focus is not on the structure of worship. Does that, are you understanding me? From the standpoint of, 3 songs and a prayer and taking the bread and the fruit of the vine and dropping the check in the plate. And sometimes the physical aspects, the tangible aspects that we participate in with our hands on it and everything like that, get the focus of our minds and our emotions and all those things. We need to make sure that God is the object of our worship. Someone talked about, we talked about the entertainment factor a little bit a while ago. And the thing about that is that there's also an aspect in which there's an entertainment factor from the standpoint of the fact that the one that we're entertaining is God. He's the one that is listening. He's the one that's watching. He's the one who is focused upon our worship. And so our worship should be toward Him and with the intent of pleasing Him and honoring Him. With that, in Isaiah chapter 55, and looking at verse 8, we're reminded of how we need that connection between us and God, because He says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. As the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return to it without watering the earth and making it bud and flourish, so that it yields seed for the sower and bread for the eater, so is my word that goes from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it." In other words, there is a lot of difference between us and God. And for us to even comprehend God is a challenge for every single one of us. Let's be honest. Even though you might spend years and years studying His Word, there is still that aspect of God that says, boy, there's so much about Him that I don't know. Now, I keep thinking about the guy that I heard about one time, and one of his students said, "You know so much about God." He was a scholar in every aspect of the Word, and he said, asked his professor, this man that was of great knowledge, said, how have you come to know that much about God? He said, "Let me get this straight. What I know about God is a thimble. What I don't know about God is the ocean." And so to be able just to be in the presence of God and be able to worship Him is such an amazing blessing to us, because it's very difficult, if not impossible, to explain God. And when we think about that, sometimes we think, well, but what chance do I have of even having any connection with God whatsoever? Well, the only opportunity that we have is because He has initiated it for us. We didn't start it. He started it by creation, and he continued it by wanting and working toward a relationship with us. In the New Testament, in Romans chapter 11, and beginning with verse 33, it says, "Oh, the depths of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out. Who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Who has ever given to God that God should repay him? For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen." This quote says basically, now that I understand a little bit about God, to him be glory forever. Forever. That's the best way that we can describe it. To just give him glory. And so still we ask the question, how can we have that connection with God? Ephesians chapter 3. Start with verse 18. It says, "May have power together with all the saints to grasp how wide, long, high, and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that," listen, "to know this love that surpasses all understanding," or all knowledge. The love that we have no ability to comprehend, that surpasses our knowledge, is the love that caused God to say, "I want my children in my presence, worshiping and interacting with me, so that, number one, I can bless them in return, and so they can bless one another as a result." That really is a kind of a nutshell, if you will, of what worship really is that God has opened the door for us to come into his presence, and not only worship from the standpoint of worshiping in the assemblies, but to live in his presence in every aspect of our lives, being worship to him. That is an amazing God that would allow us to come into his presence with the majesty and the holiness and all the other aspects of God. That in this series on worship, we're going to talk about some of those things in depth, so that we have an appreciation, maybe not an understanding, but an appreciation of why it is we worship. And that's because he's, as Jim mentioned in his prayer, because he is worthy of our worship. So this evening, if you're not a Christian, that's the kind of God we serve that we would like to introduce you to, if we can. If you are a Christian this evening, and maybe you need the prayers of this assembly this evening for some need that you have, because we do have a God that not only loves us, but has the power to act in our behalf. And if you need help in that direction, we invite you to come.